Good evening. Hello. How is everyone? It is a chilly evening. Feel like it's winter back all over again. It's great to see all your faces. Hello, Commissioner Hardesty. It's so great to see you. It's so great to see all the students that are joining us tonight.
I am thrilled to be here.
We are so honored to have you here twice in a row.
Starting a new record, I see.
I know. You're on my I'm on your calendar. You're on my calendar twice in a row.
Yeah, you know how to find me.
Yes, I know how to find you.
And you know how to find me early, which is always important.
Yes.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. So
Hi.
if you need to find me, Joanne, you know where to find me too.
Of course, yes.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see everybody again. We are joined here today with our 2021 cohort of classes of students from the Portland Traffic and Transportation course. There should be more on the way joining, but I'd like to wait for a few minutes and have others Zoom in. This class, as you all know, has been ongoing for 31 years, and it's been a thing on Zoom even before Zoom became a thing, like 5 or 6 years ago when we were teaching in person. And it had been recorded and live streamed for everybody else for at least 5 or 6 years before we've all have been homebound in this COVID world for this class. Welcome. I think we've got some good, we're at good capacity tonight. I'd like to welcome everyone to the class. We also have a handful of guests joining us for our presentations today. I want to share that we were able to do a hybrid of in-person and a Zoom class, but in-person field trip. We've had a good showing of students on the field trip that we had back a few weeks ago. We did 82nd Avenue. It's kind of a hot topic, but I'd like to share with you those who are joining us today for presentations. We have our commissioner, our transportation commissioner, Joanne Hardesty, who is joining as a reviewer. We've had her last year and very lucky to be granted in with her presence again this year. Also, we have joining us from the University of Utah is Keith Bartholomew, who's a professor of city and metropolitan planning at the College of Architecture and Planning. And for those who did not meet Keith last time, University of Utah is doing sort of the same thing we're doing here. They're initiating a traffic and transportation class in Utah, Salt Lake, and Michael and I have been working with them to get their course up and running. Joining us tonight is Michael Espinoza with PBOT, who's back again to listen to your projects. And also, I want to extend a thank you to Ananda Gordon Peabody. She's just been very instrumental over the last few months in helping curate a lot of the behind the scenes work to get this all going. So with no further ado, I'd like to first give the floor to our commissioner, Joanne Hardesty. I'd love for you to be here with us, share space with us. You are now this year our transportation commissioner. Last year, I just kind of like, I'm going to try to be lucky and got you. So I got you this year again, and it's been quite a year for you, but I'd love for you to have the floor to share your experience and also just to welcome you to this course.
Well, thank you very much. And let me first just thank the students, even for their interest in reimagining what a transportation system looks like that works for people rather than for automobiles, right? Because our life has always been about how do we move automobiles through communities. And no one has ever stopped to say, actually, public spaces are for people, right? And we should be prioritizing people. So I just want to thank you for the thoughtfulness that you put into your projects, and I can't wait to hear about them tonight. And to let you know, I didn't ask to be transportation commissioner. Our form of governor, the mayor shows up in January and he appoints people to be in charge of certain bureaus. But I could not imagine a more perfect time to be in charge of a major transportation system in a major US city. I mean, if we're ever gonna walk our talk, oh my gosh, we got a Federal Transportation Administration that actually wants to undo harm that always happens with freeway projects. We have a climate disaster in the making, and we have weather extremes that will be the norm, not the exception. So transportation will play a vital role in whether or not we get on the other side of this climate disaster that we're currently in. And again, I just can't wait for you to get out of school and come to work for PBOT or at the Federal Transportation Administration. But we need really creative thinking because unfortunately, we have way too many people stuck in a vision that was a vision of my granddaddy's time, right? And I'm probably older than most of you. So this is not the time to be thinking about the good old days. It's about thinking about how are we going to build for the next generation and how are we going to build for people, right? In communities rather than for automobiles. So I just can't wait to see what you have and look forward to being partners, strong partners, and actually spending we're going to have at least $5-6 billion that we're going to spend in the next 5 years in transportation. So we're not talking about just tinkering around the edges. If we don't make really big changes from the beginning, we will be stuck with what we have for another 50 years. And there'll be another class at PSU saying, this is what you should do, right? If in fact the planet survives till then. So thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me back. And I can't wait.
Awesome, thank you. Got some clappers behind the scenes here. I want to reiterate some of the themes that was brought within the class over the course of the term. We talked so much the importance of this course on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also weaving in the works of communities for livability and affordability. And then we did a lot of community engagement, but also wrapped in sustainability and resilience and innovative technology. So we had a whole host of amazing guest speakers within the region, the city, the state, who's come to share the work they've been doing. All along the way, students were able to ask some of the most amazing questions of during the evenings, and it's just really compelling. Each week is very compelling, and each year is compelling as well. So without any further ado, I want to present our class projects. We have some evaluations, but I had given it to, I sent it over to Keith in Utah, and if you want to use that, that's great. Aaron Golub will be joining us. But what the plan is for each of us, there'll be 6 presentations for 2 nights, and tonight will be 6. The first 3 will break, and then we'll do the last 3. And then we'll have a really good amount of time to also do a dialogue. So I've slated about 10 minutes per student, but the presentation should really take between 3 to 5, and then there'll be dialogue. So after each presentation, our commissioner and Keith and our other reviewers could chime in as to a critique. So we've done this as to how do we present what we want to show at City Council within 3 minutes. For architecture students, I know Keith, you're in the architecture school. This will be similar to a design review. And in architecture school, we go through some really grueling critiques at the end of presentation. So we'll do a good mix of both. So we'll just have this time to share space together. And I see others are coming in. Tim is joining us. So we have our schedule that I've sent out earlier today. I want to ask if anybody has any questions before we start. Yes, Kathy.
I'm not sure how I'm the first person who's going to be speaking, how it's all going to work with our PowerPoint that we sent over to you. And if you could explain that to us as presenters.
Yeah, so we are giving you two options. Number one, you could screen share. Ananda will make you a host during your presentation. So if you like, you can screen share your own presentation and go through them yourself. But if you're not familiar, if you don't want to screen share, then let us know prior to your presentation and we'll bring it up and we'll share it ourselves. And we'll flip through them as we need to during your presentation. So for instance, Kathy, I know that you sent your presentation over. Would you like to do it yourself, or would you like us to flip through them for you?
I'll flip through them. Hopefully I'll figure out if you can screen share with me how to do it. But
yeah, I just want to make sure that we have backup for those students who are not able to want to screen share. So Ananda, if you can make Kathy a host, Kathy, you could try to screen share yours and then your presentation, and we'll do it that way. And if it doesn't work, then we have the other backup so that Ananda can do it.
That green share screen button should work for you.
Yep.
So Kathy, you're going to present on the downtown Portland car master plan. Could you unmute yourself? Can't hear you.
okay. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted now.
You're unmuted now.
Okay, so I want to just go through my slides here. View. Where are we? Help. PowerPoint. View. Slideshow. There we go.
There you go.
Yay.
Awesome.
Okay.
We are our own IT. Okay, I'm going to give you the floor. Good job.
So are we starting now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't we?
My name's Kathy Tuttle, and I actually have only been in Portland for about 5 months. And one of the reasons I moved here was that I wanted to move to a city where I can age gracefully. I'm turning 65 this month, and I want to be able to walk and bike and use transit. And one of the reasons I moved here was the Clean Energy Fund, the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And I was so excited about the climate action that was happening in Portland. And also I saw that the Portland plans had 25% mode split for transit, 25% for biking within the next couple of years. And I thought, this is a city that's really going to transform fast. I want to be part of this city. I'm really excited. Well, it turns out it's still a very, very car-oriented city. And this is the reason that I decided to do a car master plan. I'm also a city planner. And so I decided to kind of pull back and look at how cars happened in Portland, what their history was, what their current use is, what their future use is. And I know that if you don't plan for something, you have no hope of actually seeing it clearly. You have no hope of changing it. For some reason, cities don't make car plans. So these are the people that I talked to. in Peabot mostly. And, you know, they kind of joked. They said, hey, you know, all plans are car plans. Well, that's actually true. It's sort of whether you are working on a bike plan, a transit plan, a walk plan, or the people in this class that are doing plans for plazas or safe routes to school. We're all kind of planning around cars, but we don't actually look at cars. We don't think about how cars are actually shaping our lives and shaping our plans and shaping our response to transportation. So this is a car plan. This is the start of a car plan. I divided it into 5 sections, kind of the history of cars in Portland, how we went from a native tribal land to a car-dominated landscape in basically a century. The second section is on the responsibilities of the Portland Department of Transportation, what they were doing. You know, it's the bridges and the roads and the concrete and the curb. The curb line turns out to be extremely important, but the things that Peabot's responsible for. And then there's the cars themselves. For some reason, we've decided as a society that everybody needs to buy a metal box. You can't really participate in society unless you own that metal box. And I decided to dive deeply into what that means, how we fuel them, what we're doing with them. Another area that I got really excited about looking at was car drivers. So there's a classic study in the Department of Peabot of the 4 types of bikers, but I decided to look at the 4 types of drivers. And actually looking at those 4 types of drivers is useful for planning how to communicate with people, how to plan with people, and because drivers are not this, you know, monolith. So I think we need to look at them separately, and then looking at the future of cars. So again, this is why make a car master plan. When we look at a picture, you know, this looks like a nice park. This is Tanner Springs Park. There's a guy sitting in the park. There's bikes, but the whole park is surrounded by cars. I mean, we have to start to see cars. Cars are everywhere. We're not going to have that mode split of 25% people taking transit and only 30% of people driving until we're actually planning for cars and looking at cars. As I said, went through the kind of the history of how Portland developed with cars and how it was a thriving city without cars. So I looked just at the downtown of Portland and did the kind of the demographic search of what was going on with Portland. This was an interesting kind of exercise of how cars grew and faded during time, over time. And so I traced using another kind of graphic program about how cars just grew, and then compared it. There's a line at the very top of that graphic showing what the CO2 analysis is as we've developed as a car-oriented culture. This I wanted to bring up too. I mean, we always talk about the fact that 25% of Portland or 25% of any city is streets. That green square there shows what those streets are. That is what Portland is responsible for paving. That's why there's a huge budget deficit with Portland, because we're responsible as a city for building, maintaining, and paving that much where that green square is, that much land of the city. And that's actually an underestimate. It's probably a little bit more than that. But the Department of Transportation is responsible for putting layers of asphalt and concrete on that much of the land of Portland. I'm not going to go through that, but you know, I encourage you to look at this whole plan. This I actually spent a long time on. It was trying to figure out where parking was in Portland. And it's something that the Department of Transportation should be really fast to understand and know about. I mentioned curb space before. I finally derived through a lot of effort where the actual curbs were, and it's that blue chart up there. So the downtown parts of Portland have about 315,000 linear feet of curb land. And that is the most valuable land of the city. And about half of it is metered parking. About 100,000 feet of it is dedicated to the movement of cars, and another 27,000 feet of it is dedicated to driveways to go into garages for cars. And then the other 27,000 of it is given over to all other uses. So that is again, the most valuable land that we have in the downtown is the curb. There's been a lot of plans. The POEM study just did a kind of a deep dive into curbs. But this is saying that most downtown Portland land is dedicated to curbs for cars. And I think that we need to really look at that and discuss that as a community about how we actually want to use those curbs. This was actually another really interesting exercise I did too, which was to go across from the river to the freeway, do a kind of a cross section of a street and look at what the different uses of the street were at each intersection. So Southwest Morrison crosses 14 streets downtown, and it turns out that this is what it looks like. This is what all of the uses of those downtown streets are. And it's pretty shocking when you kind of pull back and look at it to say, this is how we're using our precious downtown. If we're really talking about making a car light or a car less city, we need to kind of step back and take a look at how our streets are being used. I looked at the cost of cars, the environmental cost of cars, and the environmental cost of charging cars. This was the section that I mentioned that I did on the 4 types of drivers. The 4 types that I called them out were the entitled driver, the habitual driver, reluctant, and non-driver. And it turns out that the non-driver was a much larger fraction of the population than I expected it to be. And I think that we need to actually do our messaging and our plans for changing the city by paying attention to what those 4 types of drivers are. I think we can't keep on putting our messages into kind of one bucket, that they need to be different messages and different strategies for reaching entitled drivers versus reluctant drivers versus non-drivers. The way that we're going to change to the kind of community that we want to get to really has to take into account what all those different kinds of drivers are. And I can't go forward right now. And I just kind of called out if you could move that slide forward, did a little deeper dive onto each type of driver. So that's kind of the end of my kind of look at cars and Portland. I highly recommend that every city does a car master plan, because I think that if we don't do a very focused look on cars, on the thing that we're trying to control, we're not going to be able to control them. We're not going to be able to control the use of cars. We're not going to be able to get to the split of transportation options that we keep on putting forward unless we actually do planning for cars. So 4 types, and I still can't, it says stop sharing, but for some reason it can't go beyond here. So there are, here we go. Yes, so I did a kind of a deeper dive on each of the kinds of drivers: habitual, reluctant. The non-driver category, again, like I said, really surprised me. Who are non-drivers are people that we really need to support on our streets, and we don't right now. So there's that. And then finally, I ran across this document that was published 50 years ago by what was then the Department of Transportation, that recommended a lot of the downtown as car-free areas. And I think that we need to take a hard look at that and actually do some planning about car-free areas rather than just sort of talking about hopefully getting them. We actually need to plan for them. So that's my my project. I'd love to hear comments on it.
Thank you, Kathy.
Information.
Very, very good. I think it's a great research, great presentation. A lot of compelling data here, and I'm very interested in that number of 40% because we have to plan for that 40%. Commissioner.
I agree. A lot of information. I wish I could have gotten deeper into some of the information that you provided, especially into like the times where all of a sudden cars went straight up, car ownership. And I was trying to see if that was like when folks were returning from wartime, right? When they had the GI Bill and, you know, what did you do? You bought a house and you bought a car if you were a white American, right? So that's what you had the opportunity to do. So I agree. This is a really excellent presentation. I could have listened to this a lot longer. And it's really timely because one of the things that kind of appalls me as PBOT director is that we are reliant on revenue from parking garages and meter revenue, as well as fossil fuel taxes. So as a commissioner who believes climate change is real, I am definitely interested in supporting PORM and the work that they've done, and really starting to assess what is the full cost of automobile ownership, because those of us who don't own automobiles have always subsidized automobile owners. And so how do you recover the cost? You know, we're not saying we're going to take your car, but your car should pay the full cost of the damage that it does in our communities. So this is really very timely work. And it's wonderful to see the history around how people downtown have moved. I'm curious if you looked at some of the most recent improvements, like the Rose Lane and some of the new improvements about how we move vehicles through downtown. Have you seen any improvements in your research?
Again, I'm relatively new to the city. I've been here for 5 months. I think that the entire approach still is very car focused, even with the Rose Lane projects. I think that, you know, we need to get out of that focus and start saying, let's be people focused. I mean, if there's one takeaway, Commissioner, that I'd like you to really think about, it's that curb and how underpriced the curb is. The fact that there are 315 linear feet of curb, and essentially, you know, all of it goes for car use. There's not enough curb for freight, for delivery drop-offs, for, you know, other uses other than car.
So Kathy, since you are fairly new to Portland, you may not know that during COVID, PBOT did some of the most innovative work around helping small businesses stay open by utilizing the public right-of-way to expand their businesses outside because of COVID. And I have to say, PBOT did it with, you know, we didn't charge money, we just did it, right? Because what we knew was for many small businesses that was survival, right? And I tell you, all over the city, people are just giddy about that. As the PBOT commissioner, I'm committed to making sure that we have many more car-free areas in the city. But I gotta say, we didn't build it like this overnight, and we're not gonna change it overnight. But again, great research, great paper. Really look forward to utilizing this as we continue to think about how to make streets for people and not for automobiles. So thank you,
Commissioner, and I'll be happy to send you a hard copy of it.
Oh, please do. Thank you. I'd love it.
Yeah, this is great. I can only imagine the work coming out of this work. Keith Bartholomew, I'd like to give you the floor for your review.
Kathy, that was a great presentation. I'll just echo the commissioner's words on the strength of your ideas. And I knew that this was going to be a special presentation when I saw the title. And when Thuy sent around the list of the projects, I just thought, oh, this is perfect. I love it. I thought one of the particularly insightful things that you identified here were the different types of drivers, and your classification of different driver types is a nice way to mirror other user types that have been classified. You mentioned the classification of different cyclists, but there are also similar kinds of classifications for transit riders or potential transit riders. Most transit agencies, and I believe TriMet, or excuse me, yeah, TriMet is included in this, look at their markets as those people who are committed riders, those people who are occasional riders, those people who might be riders if the right conditions existed, and those people who will never be riders. And each of those market segments are further dissected into their own little categories. And what the reason that that's really important is because once you do that, then you can start to craft marketing campaigns and communication strategies that are more likely to appeal to each of the user types. And so I think your brilliance here is to start that conversation and to realize that not everybody's the same when they're inside the box. So good work.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open the floor up to our other students. Does anybody have any questions for Kathy before we move on? I see some conversations going on in the chat, but I'd like to, since we do have time, I'd like to open the floor for any questions, any feedback for Kathy.
And if they don't, there was a question that I'm burning to ask of Kathy. Kathy, most major US cities, when they gentrify, the people with the least resources have moved out to the edges of the city. And Portland is no different than every other major city where white suburban homeowners who decided being in the city would be cool again have recommitted to the city, which has exacerbated the cost of housing in the city. So we now have people of color who have to travel significant distance for their 2 and 3 minimum wage jobs. And I do not want to exacerbate their disparity by forcing them to pay significant money because they have been forced out of their communities and their neighborhoods. How do you recommend? And I know you were pretty much focused downtown, but you know, how would you address the issue of we don't all start at the same place and we don't all have access to the same resources and choices?
So first of all, downtown does have a significant population of people of low incomes. But then the other thing that I think could work successfully if we're really trying to get that mode split of most people not using a car is to do what they were talking about 50 years ago, which is to actually have parking garages where people can get off the street. You know, so people are still going to need to drive their cars. There are going to be times when, even if you're a very low income person, you're going to need to have that, you know, afford to have a car sometimes. And I think that, you know, you can't price people out of that. But I think that there are ways of working with cars and not expecting everyone to have a car for everything that they need to do. But there's certain jobs, you know, if you're a house cleaner and you're working at midnight, you're going to need to have a car. You know, there are things that people do that require cars, and I think that we can't expect, you know, the city to be car free, but I think that we can be thoughtful about where the cars are and how to use them. And
I don't disagree with that, Kathy, but I also think we have to make sure that other people have options, that people without the resources have the options of using different modes of transportation. I disagree that there are a lot of people that have never owned automobiles, so you don't have to have a car. The question is whether you have access to anything else without an automobile.
It was
Fresh food,
Yeah.
right?
I had
Except,
an interesting talk with a woman. I live very close to, there's this new Ankeny food cart area just off of Burnside. And she's a Chinese woman. And she said she used to go everywhere by bike, and she wanted to get to the food cart by bike. And she got one of the bike share bikes, and it ended up costing her $30 to take the bike from her location to the food cart. And she says, and that really just, killed her. But then she says she's also paying $250 a month in parking. And that also is just unaffordable if she's running a food cart. So, we need to figure out ways to make her life possible. She's definitely in that reluctant driver category. She has a car. She doesn't want to drive. She's commuting from East Portland by car and forced to pay a lot for parking. So we need to figure out ways of making her bike trip more successful, ways of making sure her transit is successful, but recognize that there are times she's going to need to drive. So she needs to have that variety the same way that any business person does.
So much of this really touches on health equity, sustainability, and the truth of climate change. So all encompassing. Thank you so much, Kathy. I really look forward to reading more in this really, really dense, really great information. And Joanne, we'll make sure we'll send this over to you so you can take a look at this as well. So let's move on to the next presenter. Kathy, great job.
Thank you.
And next up is Debbie. Debbie's going to share her project, which is on unsafe street intersections for pedestrians and bicyclists in the Cathedral Park neighborhood. And since we started, there's been a handful of new folks who've joined in, some I don't know. Welcome to our class. This is night 1 of senior presentations, like senior presentation. And we are on our second presenter. So Debbie, would you like to share, or would you like us to share?
Yeah, could you do that for me? That would be great.
Great. Ananda, can you facilitate that?
Okay, and now I can just move it, right? At my own pace, I think.
So I can give you remote control. You should be able to
Okay.
click through it. We can try doing that. That works.
Okay. Otherwise, that's okay, because I have it up. I have 2 screens, so I have another screen with it.
Go ahead and try to click and see if it works. And if not,
Oh.
I'll do it for you.
Okay. No. Oh, I guess I did that. How do I go back? Oh. Okay, perfect.
You should be able to use your keyboard.
Oh, use my keyboard. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. Okay. Okay. So a little bit about myself. I don't have a planning background. But I signed up for this class because a friend of mine, first of all, I retired from the city of Portland. I worked for the city of Portland for 25 years, and I retired in 2017. I worked in HR and personnel administration, but my last bureau was the Bureau of Transportation. And a fellow engineer, a friend of mine, posted on Facebook that they were looking for people to volunteer for this class. So I submitted an application, and I was surprised and happy that I got accepted for this. And it's been a real wonderful experience. I've learned so much from this class, and I'm 62, and I wanted to bring that perspective, like I walk a lot in my neighborhood, and I do bike a lot as well. And so I wanted to bring that perspective, I guess, to this presentation. So, so this is, these are, I kind of, I probably bit off more than I needed to, but these were all the intersections not very far from my house. The nice thing about the Cathedral Park St. John's neighborhood is that you can just walk everywhere. You can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to restaurants. Like 2 blocks from my house, there's a bar and a coffee shop. And then just, you know, about a 20-minute walk to Cathedral Park. So I could walk this entire section, you know, every day. So I was just kind of like, I wanted to just point out the things that I saw about unsafe intersections. And I feel like pedestrians and bicyclists are very vulnerable on the road with the other like cars and freight. So I feel like making intersections safer would promote more people walking instead of taking their cars to, you know, for shopping, local shopping and things like that. So I don't know if you can see it. So I just pointed out just on this map, on the Google map, just certain areas where I saw there was like, this is kind of an overview. So we can come back to this, or all my other slides will kind of focus on this, but this is kind of the big picture of all these intersections that I saw that I thought might could be improved. So let's go to the next one. Oops, sorry. Okay, all right. So so these are just these are intersections near Cathedral Park, and the photo on the left, they're building, I don't know if you can see in the background, that's a new 110 low-income housing apartment unit that they're building. And Cathedral Park gets really, really busy, especially during like the Jazz Festival and other events. And so I felt like this intersection here, I just felt like well, there are no stop signs here. Like there are actually no stop signs south of Willamette. There's like 30 intersections that do not have stop signs in this area. And this is one of them. And you can see where this car went right from this business, and he just kind of kitty cornered without stopping, just went up the Pittsburgh Avenue. I don't know if you can see that. But in the other picture as well, it's just another kind of uncontrolled intersection. And I did check in with the PBOT traffic engineer, and he said he would do a field check to see if parking removal is potentially warranted. Or, you know, they would restrict parking near that intersection. So it may or may not meet the criteria for them to do anything. So that was my finding on this one. So it's a matter of, I guess, kind of waiting and to hear back from the engineer. So here's another one again. It's another one where he said he would do a field check, but I thought, well, maybe they could have a high visibility crosswalk, you know, marking, or some, you know, you can kind of see how on the left photo where the car is like parked right by the intersection. So if someone was crossing that intersection from the park, from the apartment are going back to the apartment, like from Safeway, which is just up the street, if they would walk right in front of that car, then they could potentially be hit by another car because there's not a lot of visibility there. So my recommendation was to restrict parking in front of the intersection, so bigger cars like that can't park there. And I'm waiting to hear back from PBOT on that. Oops. Okay, this is a really interesting intersection. There are like 3 streets that come together, and this is again in that same area, not too far from that apartment complex and the park. It's probably not, like these 2 pictures are kind of in that area, like Edison, Salem, and then I think Burlington goes straight through all the way down to Crawford. So it's kind of like when I walk across it, even though they have made the curb extension safer, it's a little bit, I think I would, if it was really, really busy, I'd have to find a different way to cross. And then but mainly the PBOT traffic engineer said that he was just going to see if they needed to, again, restrict the cars from parking so close to the intersections. There are stop signs here on this intersection because there's like 3 or 4 streets coming together. Let's see, North Richmond and Edison. Yeah, there isn't a stop sign here. This is kind of my route when I go to Cathedral Park. And also you can see there's actually there's no curb ramp either for ADA. I don't know if you can see that on Edison and Richmond. So they kind of, I don't know if they have to do ADA curb ramp for every intersection or not. But there isn't one there. It's kind of, I would probably, like, if it was really, really busy, I would just take a different route. But like for someone, I mean, if you're wanting people to walk, I feel like, and I know, I mean, I understand that they can't, probably put a stop sign at every single intersection, and you have to, weigh in like the volume of pedestrians that are going or not. But I guess, citywide, maybe there are other areas where, if you want to encourage people though to walk instead of take a car, and during like the festivals, this would be a route where a lot of people would be walking and coming down to Cathedral Park to take part in that. But the PBOT engineer said that this is part of the area where they will not put a stop sign. So apparently over the 30 intersections that don't have stop signs, they only had 5 crashes in the last 5 years. But I guess I would ask, well, how many near misses did they have? So, I mean, I don't know if that's a good enough answer. So number 5, again, this is just the whole neighborhood area where there aren't any stop signs. So sometimes, because these intersections come right off Willamette Boulevard, there are people that just, barrel down Tyler, or they barrel down Polk, and they just run through these intersections really fast. And when I was taking pictures, some of the neighbors came out because they were like, what are you doing? They were like very suspicious. And so I told them, you know, I was doing this as part of my class. And they were like, oh my gosh, people just speed down here all the time. It is just, you know, they just said it was a little bit crazy. But I sent an email to the traffic engineer and I just said, well, you know, if you're not going to put in any kind of signage, I mean, not even yield signs, then could you put like a sign at when you're entering a neighborhood like that, that just kind of says warning, there are no stop signs? Because if you get an Amazon driver or someone who's not familiar with this area, they're just going to barrel down through and not even, you know, be looking. And I think the reason why they have an unsigned intersection is because they think all vehicles approaching are going to approach it with caution. But that may not be the case of when you have like Amazon or UPS drivers. So anyways, that's my feedback on that. Oops, sorry about that. This is another same thing as the last one. So we can just kind of look at these pictures and see that they don't have stop signs. The one on the left that's a little bit bothersome is how the neighbor let their shrub kind of grow in to the street. You know, they kind of took over that area there, but so I feel like, you know, for children that are crossing that area, and then a block down is like a dog park. So there's a lot of traffic right there. That could be, you know, a potential area for pedestrians and bicyclists. And then number 7, so all of these numbers correlate to that map, you know, the map that we saw in the very beginning. This is one that he said he would evaluate because right in front, there's this bar here, and then you can't see it, but there's a coffee shop, Cathedral Coffee Shop. And a lot of pedestrians just walk right across, you know, when they're going. So it's very busy right here. So I kind of recommended, you know, high visibility crosswalk, maybe an in-street pedestrian crossing sign. And the traffic engineer said he would evaluate it. So I was very hopeful about that.
Debbie, these are amazing photos. I'd like to move us along, however, because I know we're going to be, no, it's fine. I know we're going to be pressed for time, and I want to make sure everybody gets a conversation. I want to, these are amazing photos. I think what you're doing here is like creating such amazing awareness for everybody. I'd like to offer the floor to Commissioner and also to Keith to share your thoughts and feelings over this.
So first, let me just say well done. When I saw that first map with all the dots on it, I wasn't really quite sure where we're going to go from there, but it is, you've made your case for the fact that we have streets that were made during a time that are different than the times that we're in today. Having said that, and so I think the presentation is really wonderful. I wish PBOT would not tell people that it doesn't meet the criteria for making improvements. You know, because if I was a community member, that sounds like a brush off, and it sounds like we don't value the fact that these communities don't feel safe because of some of the conditions that are there. What I would say is that we currently enjoy a $4 billion maintenance backlog that started under Mayor Vera Katz and has never gone down. So I have inherited a $4 billion maintenance backlog, and I live in East Portland that never had like working sidewalks and streetlights and et cetera, with the promise of annexation. And so that's what I inherited. The good news is, again, we have a new administration at the federal level that's really committed to helping us restore our infrastructure. And so it's really important that we are thoughtful about engaging community and what we will be able to do with these new resources that we could tap into. But the pictures just speak volumes, and just a narrative about trying to walk to a store where there are 4 intersections with no stoplights and cars are moving at high speed. I think the bottom line is we have to do a better education with folks about speed kills. I live in a high crash corridor, and East Portland has the most high crash corridors. I saw somebody put in chat, well, it shouldn't be measured based on the number of crashes. It shouldn't, but it also shouldn't be based on the number of deaths by vehicle violence. But that is where, when you have limited money, I have to prioritize where people are dying from vehicle violence rather than what would be good to have if we had additional resources. So again, really appreciate the excellent presentation. And I'm going to talk to my bureau about being more intentional about the language that we use, because I never want people to think that we're just kind of blowing them off and not caring about what their lived experience is in their neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Keith, do you have a few words?
I do, Debbie. That's really powerful. The accumulation of the graphic that you started with the images, the still images, I think are really powerful. And I'm wondering if one of the ways to maybe take it to the next step is to get some narrated video. The quality of the video capture you can do with a phone now, and to go to some of these places, particularly the ones where you feel like there's the most vulnerability for pedestrians. I think that would maybe help to tell your story in an even more powerful way. And if you got some video footage that, you'd want to edit it down, but I think people would get it in a real visceral way. And so I'd like to encourage you to do that. Another thing is to maybe work with PBOT on, other measures that are less costly that can help control and abate speed. And so it's not just about stop signs. And there are things I know, painting intersections is a big deal in Portland. And so maybe there's some citizen-based measures where you guys are providing the kind of the elbow grease to make your neighborhood safer. Thank you for putting in so much care into the place where you live. You obviously love it very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Awesome, thank you. Let's switch gears now. And we're gonna head to Southeast Clinton and 26. And Hami will present in a creation of a new public plaza. So Hami, would you like us to be sharing screen, or would you like to do that?
I'm gonna try.
Okay. Thank you so much, Debbie.
I am on an iPad, so
We could totally share screen.
Yeah, if you could.
Nanda, could you get our presentation up, please?
Thank you.
Yep. So we're gonna go to break after Hami. And I see Aaron Golub Professor Golub has joined us. So okay, we are on, and just let us know when we need to go to the next screen.
Okay, thank you. All right, yeah, so my name is Hami Rahmani. Like Kathy, I'm relatively new. I've been here just a bit over a year. And my partner and I moved here because of infrastructure, essentially. So I take this very seriously, maybe too seriously sometimes. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. By the way, sorry, actually, just go back, sorry. This photo is from Rock Creek Trail in Hillsborough. It's beautiful. And I think it really, it kind of shows a beautiful unification of human space, people, places, and a nature space. So, all right, next slide, please. Thank you. So, I think it's important to acknowledge where we are and where we stand. We are in indigenous land, and this is my first foray into this kind of concept. I'm an immigrant from Iran, and I, for the first time in my life in this country, I'm really considering, sad to say, but I'm really considering where we actually live, and understanding that there are great tensions in our society. So the photo that I put at the bottom right corner there is from Thanksgiving 2020, about a month after we had moved here. And it's not meant to be gratuitous in any way, but it shows that there are a lot of things we still need to figure out. There's a lot of great tension. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So, just as a way for myself really to try to understand where we are, I looked very briefly at some of the indigenous practices and dwellings and things that were done on this land. So these are some of the images that you see. Huckleberries involved in land management, and then this dwelling on the right side, Chinook longhouses along the Columbia River. So obviously we know that indigenous people in this land cared deeply for it and were great stewards. And now we're moving on to, if you could go to the next slide here. Sorry. Yeah, this slide is meant to represent kind of the changes that took place. So the streets that were built, the parks that were put in place, bike lanes, lots of cars and car spaces, and our flag even changed, of course. Next slide, please. And of course, the freeways. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our freeway history here. If you could go to the next slide. It's important that we understand that the spaces that we are in right now in modern times are marked by the patriarchy, especially the white patriarchy. Most folks will recognize this image of Robert Moses, who is one of the forefathers of modern urban planning. He was involved in designing and encouraging the building of a lot of freeways. And there's cities that we see now around our country generally were built by men like Robert Moses, for men like Robert Moses, for men to commute with their cars from the suburbs to downtowns and back. And the displacement that took place as a result. There was, and frankly, probably still is very little attention paid to what I found out about through Melissa and Chris Brentlett's book, Curbing Traffic, called Care Work. This is work that is done primarily by women still, and involves basically caring for dependents, children and even adults. Next slide, please. So focusing in a little bit on local history here, we can see in the bottom left here the Mount Hood Freeway, which was planned to be built through the area that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit here. This was planned after the destruction of the Albina neighborhood, as most of us know. This was the predominantly Black neighborhood that basically destroyed many Black families' lives. Robert Moses planned for this Mount Hood Freeway to go from the Willamette River all the way to Mount Hood, basically. Next slide, please. When this came up, maybe unsurprisingly, city and regional governments were totally on board. They approved it unanimously. You can see on the right side there that's a rendering of what the freeway would have looked like. It was in the ground. That's basically Clinton Street that you're looking at there. It would have looked like basically I-405. The neighbors were not happy about this. It would have actually displaced thousands of people. It would have reduced the housing in Portland by 1%. So neighbors rose up, and at the same time there was a lawsuit. And so all of those things together led to the federal government and the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, abandoning the plan, and that money then going towards the building of our light rail, which is the MAX. That's why I have that image there. So it was in a way a happy ending, but I don't think we can escape the fact that, first of all, this was a predominantly white area that benefited from this, and that this happened after the destruction of neighborhoods already in Portland. Next slide, please. And we can't escape the fact that this is still happening, that there's still the desecration of native lands for no less than a left turn lane on Highway 26. Next slide, please. And I think we're all very familiar with what's happening in the road corridor right now. With the expansion or planned expansion of the I-5 freeway and the disruption, a potential disruption of Harriet Tubman School. And I want to shout out to the Youth versus ODOT folks who are working hard to prevent that happening. So this is all in the background of what I'm thinking about. Next slide, please. And of course, besides the social justice aspects, there's the health justice aspects of it. So next slide, please. And this is very near and dear to my heart. Some of you know I'm a physician. I'm actually a stroke neurologist. This is a brand new, well, pretty brand new review article in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the preeminent journals in the world. And it's by no means a radical journal, but you can see that they focus very plainly on fossil fuel infrastructure and the impacts it has on cardiovascular health, on neurovascular health, how it increases the risk of stroke, heart attack, diabetes, hypertension, all kinds of things. Next slide, please. And again, very plainly, they talk about the solutions for mending these broken hearts of ours with urban redesign and green space and walking trails and walking spaces and active transportation. And again, I want to reiterate that this is by no means a radical journal. This is a mainstream medical journal. Next slide, please. And if that weren't enough, the American Heart Association a year ago, roughly, September 2020, came out with this policy statement promoting wholeheartedly. I mean, if you read this policy statement, it will sound like a progressive dream for an urbanist. Pedestrian bicycle networks that are connected and equitable. Placemaking, public plazas, traffic calming. I mean, these things are continuously peppered throughout this piece. So this is really at the top of people's minds, even in the traditional healthcare world. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah, perfect. That's good. Yeah, so solutions, I think we have some, go ahead, next slide, please. Yeah, so we have some good examples of our solutions here. You can see there's public plazas and open spaces that have been created throughout the city. Next slide. And again, next slide. Yeah, so this is the intersection that I've been considering for a public plaza. This is Southeast Clinton and 26. This is looking east. You can see it's 52 feet wide at the widest point because it was a streetcar street actually. There's a slip lane, there's a lot of car infrastructure and just a little bit of other kinds of infrastructure like Bike Town Station there. Go ahead, next slide. If Robert Moses had his way, this would be a freeway. But now it's a greenway and it is pretty well used by bicycle riders. Go ahead, next slide. But it's still car dominated. We can see in this image that, there's a large truck right in the midst of all these people biking. And I put this inverted pyramid here to show you that PBOT wants to prioritize pedestrians, bicycle riders, and public transit. Yet we find ourselves in this kind of space with cars still. Go ahead, next slide. This is, I want to reiterate that this is a discussion only, for discussion purposes only image. I got this from Nick Faldo, who I've been talking to regarding the plaza. You see what would end up happening. There's already a plaza to the west of 26, which is in the middle of this image. So we're talking about implementing a plaza on the east side, thereby basically connecting these two plazas. Go ahead, next slide. I just want to talk about reimagining this space, bringing it back to the indigenous folks of this land, planting indigenous plants, inviting nature back into our lives, along with people places like benches and playgrounds and public squares and all those kinds of things. I do want to.
I want to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. This is so beautiful. We are going to be right at time pretty soon. Let's speed it up a little bit because I really want to see what you have, and I'd like to welcome our commissioner to comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Joanne?
I'm loving this presentation. I love the historic nature and the historic context under which you started, the research that you did. And what you're talking about is the social determinants of health, which is something that I'm a big fan of. And it's all about walking neighborhoods and creating spaces that are vibrant and alive and community centric. So I love this. This is absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
And please send it to me. Am I going to get all of these? I need them all.
Sure, we can send them all to you.
Thank you.
We'll give you access to all of the folders. Keith, do you have a few words before we move on? I do want to give us an opportunity for break before we.
Yes, I will just say 2 words, Hami. Tactical urbanism. What are you doing on Friday night?
Right.
Yeah.
The commissioner couldn't say that, but the first VUNERF was created by citizens going out and taking sledgehammers to their streets. And eventually the government said, that's a good idea. So, you might think about going out and just painting some lines, show people what it looks like.
You know, I don't disagree with you at all, and I'm all about tactical urbanism. I will have to say that we did talk to businesses. I did ask some of our neighbors there and friends to talk about this with the businesses there, and it's about 50-50 if I'm being kind, as far as desire to have this. There's still a lot of focus on cars and parking and access to my business, and unfortunately it's really premised on not facts. You know, so our goal was to try to get some buy-in, but I'm ready for the sledgehammers.
Yeah, I would
think we
encourage
should all
you
get to
not to
work.
take sledgehammers to the city streets. I told you about my $4 billion maintenance backlog already, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, meet with us, take advantage of making this presentation in front of the city council, right?
Mhm.
Just because an idea isn't on the plate to be funded this year, doesn't mean that we can't start moving in incremental ways that actually starts building support for it, right? So, you know, nothing is never, I never hear no as a no. What I hear is haven't figured out the right entryway to start creating the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. Beautiful. Hami, thank you so much. I love the presentation. I love the photos. I love your land acknowledgement. I normally do a land acknowledgement before most of my my meetings, but thank you so much. Let's go to break. Let's do a 10-minute break. Thank you so much. We will come back.
Hey, I'm the co-host now. Welcome to my show, everybody.
You're on. It's all you now.
Should we wait a little longer or should I
Yeah.
get started? Yeah.
Give yourself. I think I said 8:06. The
All right.
dog needs a treat. We all need a little treat. Oh gosh, this is fun. We have Aaron Golub here, professor at PSU, and he's the one who talked about how this is like a box of chocolate. The end of each class for projects. So I'm a little blurry, so let me stop this for a second. But folks are joining in. Hendrik, feel free to bring up your presentation, and we'll listen to what you have to share regarding reducing traffic congestion around schools, safe route to school.
Yeah, give
You're
me
up.
a second. Just trying to let me screen share. Well, it's not
working.
giving me security and privacy. It's asking me to update some things.
Oh, okay. Well, in the interest of time, let's not update. Ananda, can you just share? The computer will always ask us to do something, but we got to be smarter than the computer.
That's right.
At the most
Okay.
horrific time, it asks for stuff.
Okay, this is perfect. Thank you, Ananda. So my presentation is about school zone traffic reduction. The idea here is cars around schools. So I was hoping to work on a project to reduce cars and reduce idling around schools, encourage or find ways to encourage multimodal and active transportation around schools, and the results would be healthier students, families, and communities. And before moving forward, I think it's important to share three things. One, I am the Safe Routes to School coordinator at the City of Tigard. Therefore, you will see themes of safe routes to school here, obviously. Two, something I've been learning a lot. I've been in this position for almost a year now. The Safe Routes to School program is great in that it has a lot of tools and flexibility, but those strengths also feed its weakness, which is that it doesn't have a ton of structure, and unfortunately, sometimes doesn't have a lot of strength behind it or backbone to enforce anything. It's kind of like a buy-in program instead of a policy type program. And then the third part is this project for me started as a story of what to change, and it turned more into how to create change. So with those ideas, next slide, please. So the general issue here is schools have historically and currently struggled with traffic congestion. Obviously not just schools, but we're focusing on schools here. And this problem, especially around drop-off and pickup times, has just gotten worse and more challenging over time. One of the famous Safe Routes to School studies say that in 1969, 48% of students walked or biked to school. And more recently, and this was an early 2000 study, that was more like 13% of students. Taking those numbers and looking at the Tigard-Tualatin School District, TTSD, and that's who I work primarily with, they have just over 12,000 students, K-5 through high school. And if you assume that even just a third of those result in single family car rides, we're talking about potentially 4,000 cars driving to and from schools twice a day in one city with one school district. That's a lot. So that's just to kind of give you a picture of what we're talking about and what we're trying to address. And then this problem was just made more difficult with the COVID pandemic. So fewer kids are on buses. This is more qualitative because I don't have numbers for this, but just with the schools I'm working with, all of them are struggling with a lot of traffic around schools, which leaks into the surrounding neighborhoods. And we're hearing about that from a lot of different inputs. So the negative consequences from this are less active, less healthy students and families, more traffic around schools and neighborhoods and communities. And because of the increased traffic and increased idling, because cars can't get to where they're trying to go or back, we're getting reduced air quality around schools, especially during the hot periods when people are also walking to and from school. So it's just a lot of bad things happening at once. Next slide, please. I'm also sorry I don't have any cool pictures. Hami, that was really nice. That's something that if I could go back, I would add those here. But instead we have cool colors. So possible solutions to these challenges, I think there are many. This is what the fun part about this project is there's like all these different categories of types of solutions. And to me, I started exploring, it's tough. You can't just go to a whole school district and say, hey, every school block the streets around your school when school starts and school ends. Like there's no situation where one solution fits every school and every community. So we have to look at a broad range of solutions and then piecemeal them together or create a marketing approach where we say, okay, for each school, what will work here and how can we make these things work? So with that in mind, I created two lists that we'll call menus, and those were behavioral and engineering. Those are loose categories. They might not perfectly fit all of the solutions, but those are the categories I came up with. And let's talk about behavioral first. Next slide, please. So I'll just kind of fly through these because I do think they're useful to just hit each one. Educating families on options available for alternative transportation. So bus, walking, biking to school, carpooling. It's surprising how hard it is to find this information through the school district website. And so I feel like pushing information sharing information and creating information is super important. Educating students so that they can be safe pedestrians, and that can be just general pedestrian safety and also advanced biking safety skills. Encouragement events to get families out and practicing these alternative transportation modes is a great approach. Creating resources like suggested walking and biking routes around schools, carpooling schedules, and even walking school buses or biking school buses. Incentives is, I know, a tricky, or disincentives is a hard thing that, you know, I hear presentations that say they can work sometimes, but often they don't. So it's on the list, but it's not something I've really considered. And then policy is what really got me thinking, because Safe Routes to School is a program that encompasses a lot of these ideas, but it's a carrot, but there's no stick behind it. So when in my experience working with schools, I share information, I try to get buy-in, I work with a lot of different stakeholders, but at the end of the day, if people say we're too busy, sometimes that's the answer I get. So that kind of has been turning this story from what to change to how to change. And I'll get back more on that with a case study at the end. Next slide, please. Engineering, because we're short on time, I'll let you read through these, but engineering solutions are great because if you can say, hey, we're gonna address this infrastructure gap, or we're gonna change something in the infrastructure that isn't working. It might be a slow process because changes in traffic and engineering are slow, but they happen. So this might happen in 5 years, but that's okay. So I like engineering because it's once the decision's made, things can be done, even if it takes a long time. So next slide. We'll talk about one case study. This is Mary Woodward Elementary. They saw this year, they've seen a lot of traffic that they haven't seen in previous years. In September, they had 3 traffic complaints to the city in like a 2-week period. And they reached out to me with a challenge here. And if you want to read the issue and their request, it essentially says, there's congestion all around the school, which isn't normal. It's tough for us. Let's find solutions. Next slide, please. So here's a Google Maps shot with some options to help relieve congestion. And I worked with the City of Tiger traffic engineer and senior transportation planner. I interviewed them and asked their opinions on my approach, and they helped me tweak it to 3 approaches here. I'll just quickly run through each of them. Number 1, the blue, is the main entrance to the school, and it's just creating a flow of traffic with right turns to hopefully expedite that flow of traffic, which is the main point of congestion. Number 2 is in green, and that's where cars are creating congestion at the back of the school, where a lot of kids would come out via bike or pedestrian use. And so there was a safety concern and also congestion. And number 3 was an idea I posed of a walking school bus to the nearby park. In that top left corner, you can see Summer Lake Dog Park. Next slide. So this is my last slide. You can read more about any of those specific options, but I'll finish by saying that even with all this that I have worked with the school, I don't think much is going to happen other than a little piece of that blue number 1. We are working on that flow together, but I don't think the rest are going to happen this year. And that's because I haven't gotten the buy-in or the confidence from schools to take on big changes. And so to me, I came to a conclusion, and I see it working, is that I need to have the school's confidence in me to make big changes. And that happens through small changes. So I'm trying to do 2nd grade pedestrian safety education at every elementary school. And that's an easy thing to buy into. And for me, if I can do that this spring with most schools, then next year I can take the next step and push a little harder. And then once I have stakeholders and principals and parent organizations at each school, I want to take this to TTSD and say, okay, how are we going to do these bigger things now that I have people that want to and believe in the things that we're proposing? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Hendrik. Commissioner and Keith, I'd like your feedback. I'd like to hear your feedback.
Keith, you want to go first this time?
Well, you're very kind. Sure. Hendrik, I'm inspired. Your wisdom on the power of incremental change and the perseverance that is necessary for that, and taking the long view. I think you're absolutely right. You're mounting a campaign here, and it's brilliant. You've got a vision of what to do, at least at this one school, and I think you can probably leverage that for other places too. And keep going, keep going. I love it.
And I would add, for me, I'm really excited about the more you can get parents excited about reducing the health impact on their kids, the more they become your champions for this change, right? And so Keith is absolutely right, is that what you're doing is building a campaign that the families will come to the schools, right? It won't be your job to sell to the superintendents of the school districts this theory, right? It will be the families that will be writing to the superintendent, writing to the school board, demanding these changes, right? If you do your work right, and it looks like you've got a really good plan about how to move that forward. And let me just say that it's a very creative idea to have a walking school bus. I mean, I'd never heard that term before. And that's really a creative idea to think about how do you create a safe gathering spot for young kids when they are waiting for their parents to pick them up. I think about this in other areas. I would wonder if public transit was available, if that was something that students used a lot of prior to COVID, then I would be putting more pressure on the public transit entity to provide a safe, affordable, or free bus rides for school. I still believe that public transit should be free for any kids that are from elementary school on up, because how do you build the next generation of public transit users if you don't start them young, right? So I'm not sure about what the transportation issues are in Tigard. I know they're a little different than they are in Portland, but I would say your parents are going to be the best allies, and they're going to be your strongest argument for why what you're proposing would work.
Thank you.
Awesome, wonderful, Commissioner. I also see that Aaron is on. Professor Golub, do you have any feedback?
Hi everyone, sorry I'm late. I had another meeting and kind of now eating some dinner, so I might be on and off camera, but I don't really have anything to add. I think it was just a testament to how understandable the kind of multi-E, framework is, and how it was really well embodied here in this presentation, the engineering, education, and so it was really a good, just a good example of that being used for advocacy and information. Great job.
Great, thank you, Hendrik. Thank you. There's some really great feedback from your classmates in the chat. I would love for you to go through there and review it. So next up, we have Joan, who will be talking about bike lane sweeping. So Joan, would you like us to share? Or would you like to share?
No, I think, can you see that now?
Yep.
My presentation. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm Joan Pettit. I'm a librarian at Portland State, and I have been very pleased to participate in this class as a citizen. So in the City of Portland Comprehensive Plan, we have a goal that 25% of all trips will be made by bicycle by 2035. This is a really ambitious goal for the city. In 2019, before the pandemic, the bike commute rate was 5.2%, the lowest it had been in years, and down from a high of 6.3% in 2007. However, I think we have a real opportunity right now, the pandemic bike boom. Sales of regular bikes went up about 62% from 2019 to 2020, and sales of e-bikes went up a whopping 145% from 2019 to 2020. Americans bought 2 million e-bikes in 2020. Here in Portland, local bike shops can't keep bikes in stock, especially the lowest cost entry-level bikes. How do we get those folks to keep riding their bikes more and driving less? We talk a lot about the infrastructure we'd like to see, more protected bike lanes especially, but let's also talk about maintenance. Because you can have excellent facilities, but if you don't maintain them, people won't use them or they won't be able to use them. So, fall in Portland. This is a time when a lot of folks stop riding bikes. Is it the cold? Is it the rain? I think a lot of it is the leaves in the bike lanes and maybe also the rain. Certainly local bike folks become somewhat obsessed with talking about the leaves in the bike lane and documenting this. It's not just annoying, it's a real danger. While cars can drive right over and through leaves, it's much riskier for folks on bikes. Leaves are slippery. They can also hide obstructions, potholes, sticks, trash, glass, and much more. They're also a danger for pedestrians crossing streets. Leaves accumulate in our busiest bike lanes. Reporting problems to PBOT doesn't necessarily mean that they get picked up very quickly, even on the busiest bike routes like Broadway and North Williams. As a bicyclist, when you see these leaves, you have to choose between taking your chances on the leaves and swerving into the vehicle lane. And it can really be quite scary. The photo that I didn't share is of the daughter of a friend of mine who crashed on the wet leaves and was injured this fall biking home on North Williams, which is, I believe, Portland's busiest and one of the busiest bike routes in the entire country. And yet it was full of leaves and really dangerous conditions. So why are the leaves in the bike lanes? Well, that's how we build our streets. According to a report from the city of Portland, 97% of debris lies within 40 inches of the curve because streets are designed to slope to the sides and the movement of cars pushes debris like leaves to the sides. So with most of our bike lanes being built at the edges of streets, we've created an entire network of debris lanes for bikes. So how bad is it out there? Some people just stop biking in the fall completely, specifically because of the leaves. People who read Bike Portland know that every fall there's another whole article and photos of how bad things are. I did an informal poll with folks on social media, and more than 30 people, more than half, basically said that they had been injured or had some sort of crash or accident because of leaves. And a few of them said that it was actually a pretty bad situation. Portland does have a street sweeping schedule. Protected bike lanes, for the past several years, they were swept every 9 weeks. As of this July, that's actually increased. So thanks to PBOT for that. Major streets, including those with bike lanes, are swept 6 to 8 times a year. That's not enough for the fall. Folks who bike are often encouraged to report problems via the PBOT maintenance line or via PBX reporter, which again, it doesn't always lead to a quick response. For example, a colleague of mine said that he's reported Northwest Broadway several times over the past month and took photos today showing how bad it is. In fact, he recently cleaned out leaves himself from the front of his daycare at the Helen Gordon Center at Portland State. Another problem with relying on complaints is that we know complaint-driven systems are inherently inequitable, as exemplified by a recent city auditor report for property maintenance in Portland. We don't want to have clear bike lanes in some neighborhoods because the right person reports that the leaves are there. In the big picture, I just can't imagine that we would have this kind of obstruction in vehicle lanes for a month and not clean it out right away. With the rain last week, some of the roads were blocked and it was like all hands on deck to solve that problem. And PBOT is already doing a lot of work with leaves, leaf day for residential leaf pickup. So we need a better solution for bike lanes. I'd like to see the city buy more sweepers. There are large sweepers and then there are also small ones that can go into, we have, I don't know how many we have, but there's at least one, small sweepers that can go into the protected bike lanes. And I'd like to see more people work on the sweeping crew, but we especially need more sweeps in the fall and October through December. Because here's the thing about leaves, they're incredibly predictable. We know that this is going to be happening every fall. This is not like snow events where it's forecast, but it doesn't happen. We know when the leaves are going to fall. This happens every single year. And in the winter, I also wanted to add the gravel that we put down for ice gets pushed into the bike lanes, so the roads can be dry and clear for weeks, and the bike lanes are still full of gravel, which is really dangerous if you slip. I know folks who've gotten tremendously injured on that gravel. We could also
Joan,
oh,
Joan,
sorry.
we are really close to time. We only have 10 minutes
Okay.
left before class closed. So I just want to
Sure, yeah. So this is
yeah.
all I was going to say, just that I have some proposals for how we could do this with an eye towards equity and not make sure we're just focusing on this in the central city. So, and I'm glad to share more information about that if people would be interested. But yeah, I can finish here.
Thank you. I hate having to do this every time.
It's okay.
Yes, this is an ongoing problem, right? Because they're way too interesting
I
to
know.
try to do in such a short period of time.
I
But
know. But
this-
isn't this a rule at City Hall though? How do you do this every time?
well, I mean, we have now. I've now trained the mayor to actually just have them silence the mic at the 3-minute mark because I found myself playing a time clock, a cop,
Keeper.
right? And I didn't want
Yeah.
to keep playing time. So we finally figured that one out.
Yeah.
Let me just say, excellent presentation. The passion that you feel about biking comes across clearly in that presentation. And I'd like to be able to tell you who's actually responsible for cleaning up the stuff in the bike lane, because the city doesn't in fact have a maintenance department. Metro and the city of Portland have very distinctive roles that we play, but our job is not to go around cleaning up the city in that way, right? So the question is, we have to figure out, you're absolutely right, it should happen, but the question is, how should it happen, right? And are there contracts out there now that could be changed to actually accommodate that? I don't know the answer. It would be great if I could hire more people and buy more equipment, but you may have heard at the beginning, I have a $4 billion deficit. So the chance of me hiring more people for that 3-month period of time is not feasible right now, right? But I love the passion, and trust me, you are not the only one that I've heard this from throughout Portland every year at this time, right? Great presentation, very thought-provoking. Love to get a copy of it and think about how do we bring folks together, because I'm not a elected person that likes to say, well, that's not my job, right? That belongs to some other government, right? But here's what I'd like to say. I'd like to say, let's bring the governments together who have a responsibility and just kind of figure it out, right? People assume it's PBOT just because we're transportation, but we're transportation, not a leave pickup, right? So, but we need to figure out who should be responsible for that and make sure it happens. Very compelling presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Keith, just 1 or 2 words. I really want to close tonight on time. We have 1 more to
Sure.
go.
How about engineering? Those streets are engineered to guarantee debris in the lanes. Portland has led the way for redesigning streets, redesigning them, horizontally. How about redesigning them vertically? Sounds like a great challenge for the engineering department at PSU.
We need your help. Yes.
What if we put the bike lanes in the middle?
Oh, Keith, you don't know I have an engineering background. I don't. Okay. Keith, the other Keith, are you ready?
I'm ready.
And you're on. I think you want to share. So
Yeah, I do. And do you see that tweet?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a high bar. These have been some great presentations. Thank you all very much. Commissioner Hardesty, it's so nice to see you. Keith, thanks for joining us. And Tui and Ananda, great job. It was going to be on the Rose Quarter, but I really wanted to increase the vision of the travel shed that we're working on. So essentially what I'm working on is the Albina Corridor Tolling or Albina Corridor Travel Shed. It takes the Albina district, but then it really tightens it up between Greeley and MLK. And working with PBOT, we really wanted to put the I-5 right between it. And I'll move on, so forgive me, I'll be brief. Essentially, what we're looking at is ODOT is considering variable rate tolls on the entire I-5 and the entire I-205 throughout Portland. And while variable tolls, we can't address our road and funding with variable tolls alone. If implemented as a standalone solution in the Albina Corridor, it will continue the decades of harm this community has endured. And to counter, I would propose to ODOT that we consider 2 additional tolling options: managed lanes and cordon pricing. Just funding our roads isn't a solution. We have to focus on solutions that transforms our roads. We have the technology. So that's a camera pillar system. It's artificial intelligence, and it can tell how many souls are in the car. It can then use exemptions for 3+ HOVs, buses, and emergency vehicles. But what's important, it's extremely low cost. And then working with ODOT, they have the world's most sophisticated architecture in their Origo system, which is a mobility as a service. And right now, that system or the AI can work with the architecture, and this can all be done without very costly gantry systems. So we want an effective system that's modular, and that's something we can just plug and play as different technology comes forward. So now, just to give you an overview of these 3 tolling options: variable pricing. That's what everybody's really using. And to give you a brief understanding, it's a toll structure developed to encourage drivers to shift from peak periods to off-peak periods, and it gives a discount or a lower price. The high point on this is it's very effective at reducing single occupancy vehicles. And that's really why ODOT's looking at it. They want to try and address congestion. It's effective in the sense that on the research, it'll create 7% to 30% less vehicle trips. Now that's good. But when you look at the photos in the upper right-hand corner, that's a brand new highway that Seattle just built over Lake Washington. Building roads doesn't allow you to reduce or remove congestion. It just gives more people more area to drive. And when you look at the HOV lane in that left lane, it's going the same rate that the normal traffic's going. So it hasn't really transformed anything. It's just given us another opportunity to fund the roads, to build more roads, or to maintain more roads. But we have to think in more of a larger system approach. But the main drawback is variable pricing, is that it will toll and congestion avoidance will shift vehicles from the road maintenance from I-5 or ODOT. It'll shift vehicles to the Albina Corridor Travel Shed and put it on PBOT's dime, because people are going to try and avoid. And Joan, you said something earlier. You said Williams is the most bike trafficked road in the nation. If you toll the I-5, those souls are simply going to take the Alberta exit Killingsworth, and they're going to move right onto Williams and Vancouver to try and avoid. We've created a complete opposite from what we're trying to, or our goals, if you will. So if we use managed lanes, and there are 2 examples in the right side, it's dynamic tolling. It's a separated lane within a highway, maintaining free flow speeds at 45 miles per hour. Again, the overall goal is we want to transform our transportation system, not just find ways to pay for it. And it increases every 5 minutes as the flow of traffic increases, because we want to move people from point A to point B, but we want to get them out of their cars, and we really want to get them into bus rapid transit. So think about a bus rapid transit on the inner lane of the I-5 from downtown Portland to Vancouver, going 50 miles per hour. Someone waiting in traffic in the standard general purpose lane is going to see this bus go by at 50 every day. And they're going to think, whether rich or poor, I want my life back, and I want to move from Portland to Vancouver in 15 minutes rather than an hour. And you're going to see an 80% less GHG per passenger mile versus an SOV on that bus. It's predictable time. There's merge safety issues, but I'll show you an example at the end of this presentation how we can overcome that. This is a great capacity photo. We've seen this before, but it just shows you the capacity of one bus, one vehicle versus 60 cars. It's a visual manifestation of how we can improve frequency, service, ridership, lower congestion, but reduce emissions, which really has to be the fundamental core value of every conversation we move forward. especially in a warming climate. Now, the third and final is how do we protect the Albina corridor? It's with cordon pricing, except we exempt the Albina corridor residents and businesses because we don't want to harm them again. They've already given up the Minnesota Avenue to make it a freeway. We've put a freeway right down this community. So now we want to start protecting and focus on restorative justice. These 9 cameras, these artificial cameras, just simply do ANPR, automatic number plate reader. It goes into the database. If that person has permitted and lives in that neighborhood, they're just not charged. But if you're someone trying to avoid the toll from I-5 while you're going to Vancouver, or you're trying to cut and move away from the freeway into our corridor to compromise our safety and way of life, then you're going to be charged. And I'll start on the right-hand side. In Amsterdam, they value biking, they value pedestrians, they value their neighborhoods. If you go off highway to drive into a protected corridor, it's $100. It's 90 euros. In New York, new cordon pricing, it's $8. I think it's very undervalued, but all of the funds collected in New York are going to go to their transportation system to fund the decrepit subway system. But now they've got a funding solution. So the key part here is we have to have cordon pricing on the I-5. What ODOT does with the rest of the structure is one thing, but in this one corridor where we've already compromised that community so many times, we can't have toll avoiders going into the community. But more important is that because this is a toll that's off highway, all these funds go to PBOT. It starts funding their system. And then these revenues go to really start building back the community and the restorative justice and building a transit-friendly system as opposed to a road-focused funding system. A couple more slides and I'm done, Tweet. So now we don't want to build freeways anymore. This is a unique, what's that?
We're right at time, so let's.
Okay, no problem. And I've just completed, so Tweet, that's absolutely fine. So thank you very much.
Okay, awesome, thank you. This is so cool. We will have these presentations available for Commissioner and for Keith and also for Aaron. With your permission, if that's okay, students, that we can share this. Commissioner and Keith and also Aaron, this is so awesome. Great work, Keith.
Incredible. I wish we had more time to talk about this because I'm spending morning, noon, and night just thinking about both the Rose Quarter and the I-5 bridge replacement project. Really a fascinating presentation. I have so many questions, but let me just say, cordon pricing is not something I'd heard of before. I am definitely working to make sure that before any bonds are sold, that we changed how we share the funding mechanisms so that it doesn't all just go to whatever it is that happens on the freeway. So has to have some kind of high speed, and I don't know whether it's high speed bus or whether it's high speed rail, but it has to have that. So really great work, and look forward to getting it and being able to absorb it more.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I love how you focused so much on restorative justice in that corridor that has been so impacted. And I thought your proposal was very well tuned to those issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Aaron, do you have anything you want to offer?
Well, I don't have anything different to add. It was interesting. I think the cordon pricing on top of the managed lanes is an important addition. So
yeah, I just wonder how many of the people in Albina came after all the damage was done. And so I would want to look into if it's really about restorative justice to make sure the folks who've been pushed out to East Portland were not detrimentally impacted by the tolling. So I wouldn't automatically support, because Albina looks a lot different today than it did 30 years ago when I moved to Portland.
Yeah. These projects are so amazing. It's almost like a tease just to listen to a good part of it, right?
That's right.
We will resume next week. You're more than welcome to come join us.
I can. I know you'll send the link.
Hey, you're more than welcome to join. I've downloaded all the presentations. I will send them over to you. Thank you so much. Thank you for those who shared tonight. Thank you for those who've been working on your projects for next week. thank you to our guests. It's been a riveting night. There's so
What
much.
incredible
And
presentations. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome work. Every one of them would stand by themselves as a project for a transportation bureau. So well done. Good
you
night.
guys are awesome. Just very awesome.
Bye-bye. Have a great